Welcome to Facts Radio, your journey through history begins here. In this episode, we explore the Manhattan Project, secrecy, science, and the dawn of nuclear power. You are about to enter a world where midnight thunderstorms crackle over desert bunkers, where chalkboards bloom with equations that could end worlds, and where ordinary men and women vanish from their former lives to build a weapon unlike any in history. Listen for the Geiger counters ticking like distant cicadas, for the low rumble of freight trains slipping through blacked-out rail yards, for the hush inside a laboratory where the air itself seems to hold its breath. This is not just a story of physics and politics, it is a story of conscience and collision, of humanity's brightest minds racing toward a darkness no one had yet named. So dim the lights, lean in close, and let the story begin. Chapter 1: A Letter That Changed the World. Imagine the tension in the summer of 1939, while Europe still pretends peace and New York's sidewalks shimmer with heat. On the 8th floor of the Flatiron Building, a Hungarian physicist named Leo Szilard waits for the elevator, a sealed envelope trembling in his hand. Inside that envelope is a letter addressed to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a letter co-signed by Albert Einstein, a letter that warns of a chain reaction so powerful it could level entire cities. Szilard's palms sweat. He has calculated the future in neutron flux and half-lives, and the numbers scream catastrophe. Yet the city outside hums with ice cream trucks and stock market laughter, unaware that the doomsday clock has already started ticking. The letter begins, "Sir, some recent work by E.F.M.E. and L. Szilard leads me to expect that the element uranium may be turned into a new and important source of energy." The words are polite, almost clinical, but between the lines roars a mushroom cloud of possibility. Roosevelt receives it on October 11th, after a game of bridge, after cocktails, after the ordinary rituals of a world still intact. He reads it twice, then calls in his aide. This requires action. 5 short sentences that will bend the arc of the 20th century. Picture the president's cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling while, 3,000 miles away, Nazi scientists huddle over their own blackboards, their own uranium cubes glinting under rice-red lamps. It's hard to believe, but the United States at that moment possesses only 46 pounds of uranium, most of it used as yellow pigment in ceramic glazes. The Army's biggest concern is a shortage of canteens. Yet within 6 weeks, Roosevelt authorizes the Advisory Committee on Uranium, a title so bland it sounds like it should debate all quotas, not build planet-splitting bombs. The committee meets in Washington's munitions building, a pile of limestone so nondescript that janitors walk past without a second glance. Inside, generals and physicists eye each other like rival species. One side speaks in calibers, the other in angstroms. Between them sits a single coffee pot, slowly cooling, its glass cracked, a silent omen. Winter creeps in. Newspapers report snowfall in 43 states, the worst in decades. Trains stall, rivers freeze, yet the committee's first purchase slips through the cold unnoticed, 2 tons of purified graphite, ordered under the guise of experimental brake linings. Picture the graphite arriving at a Columbia University laboratory at midnight, stevedores grumbling about crates that seem to swallow light. Inside, Enrico Fermi, ebullient, cigar-chomping, supervises the stacking of bricks like a boy with radioactive Legos. Each brick is a stepping stone toward what he calls a pile, a lattice of uranium and graphite that will either fizzle or ignite the air itself. The workers joke about building the world's heaviest campfire. Fermi laughs with them, but his eyes keep flicking to the slide rule in his pocket as if it might burst into prophecy. Across the Atlantic, war erupts with the mechanical certainty of a wound spring. Hitler's panzers rip through Poland, radio static crackles with Polish cavalry charges that sound medieval against tank treads. In Cambridge, England, 2 émigré scientists, Otto Frisch and Rudolf Piles, take evening walks through fogged meadows and calculate the critical mass of a uranium bomb on the back of a chocolate wrapper. Their memo reaches Winston Churchill's desk in March 1940, stamped with a red urgent slash. Meanwhile, in Berkeley, California, Ernest Lawrence spins deuterons in his cyclotron until the magnets moan. Glenn Seaborg discovers plutonium in a sample no larger than a grain of sand, and the sand glows like a miniature star. Every discovery is a whisper in a widening gyre, a note added to the chord of an approaching storm. Back in Washington, the advisory committee graduates from showboxes to budgets. Vannevar Bush, no. Relation to the presidential family, wears rimless spectacles and carries the authority of a man who once built analog computers out of torque rods and bicycle chains. He convinces Roosevelt to greenlight a stealth appropriation hidden inside a naval radar bill, $6,000 for further uranium investigations. The sum is laughable, less than the cost of the president's wheelchair elevator, yet it germinates. Paperwork spawns paperwork, secrecy drapes itself over the project like blackout curtains over Manhattan windows. By spring, the scientists receive envelopes stamped with a new designation, Section S1, a code name so innocuous it could be a filing drawer. But inside those envelopes, Geiger counters start to sing. Imagine the tension on the night of July 4, 1940, while America celebrates with sparklers and lemonade. In a Columbia basement, Femi and Szilard lean over a small cylinder of uranium oxide, their faces lit by the green glow of a phosphor screen. Every click of the counter feels like a heartbeat. They are measuring neutron multiplication, the moment when one splitting atom births enough neutrons to split 2 more, then 4, then 8, an invisible avalanche. The clicks accelerate, then plateau. Femi whispers, "We have achieved a chain reaction." No champagne pops. Instead, Szilard turns to his partner and says, "This will go down as a dark day in the history of mankind." The fireworks outside drown his voice, but the words hang in the air like fallout dust, waiting for the wind of history to scatter them across the coming years. Chapter 2: Ghost Cities in the Desert. By the autumn of 1941, the S1 section has metastasized into a shadow bureaucracy, its ledgers coded like spy novels. Vannevar Bush appoints a quiet engineer named Leslie Groves as military director, a man whose previous claim to fame was building the Pentagon in record time, an architectural Ouroboros consuming 5 million square feet of concrete. Groves loathes delays the way priests loathe heresy. When he is told the bomb project needs a secluded site, he opens a Rand McNally atlas, stabs his finger into the crease between Tennessee hills, and says, "Here." Within weeks, bulldozers shave 59,000 acres of farmland into a city that does not exist on any map. They call it Site X. The locals, paid to move, whisper about that place the government erased. Picture the first train pulling into a brand new station at dawn, steam mixing with valley fog. Families step onto platforms still smelling of fresh-cut pine, clutching suitcases labeled with last names that will soon be classified. Children stare at barracks painted the color of wet cement, at watchtowers whose searchlights sweep like lighthouse beams across a sea of trees. A loudspeaker crackles, "Welcome to Clinton Engineer Works. You are now part of the Manhattan District." No mention of uranium, no mention of war, only badges with photos that make everyone look like suspects. Mothers whisper to daughters, "We're helping win the war, but we can't say how." The girls nod, eyes wide, as if secrecy itself were a new kind of arithmetic. Inside the fences, roads receive names like Broadway, Maine, Pennsylvania, and homage to hometowns left behind. Yet the sidewalks end abruptly at barbed wire, and the cinema shows only newsreels pre-approved by censors. Construction crews work in 3 shifts, pouring concrete for Y12, a plant of such outlandish design that blueprints are printed on fabric to prevent photocopying. The machinery inside will spin uranium in magnetic calutrons, giant silver racetracks where atoms are sorted like thoroughbreds. Imagine the hum, a deep, uterine throb felt in shin bones at midnight. Workers wear wooden shoes so static won't spark explosions, they glide like klutzy skaters across floors polished to a lethal shine. Every shift ends with a security lecture, "What you see here, what you hear here, let it stay here." The phrase becomes hymn, becomes lullaby, becomes nightmare. It's hard to believe, but the most critical ingredient arrives in plain brown trucks. Uranium ore, mined in the Belgian Congo, travels by freighter to New York, then by rail through segregated southern towns where porters wonder why these particular crates glow faintly under canvas tarps. At Site X, the ore is roasted, crushed, dissolved in acids that hiss like serpents. Chemists in rubber aprons stir vats the size of swimming pools, steam coating their goggles until the world shrinks to a silver blur. They call the product orange oxide, but in the parking lot at dusk it looks like powdered sunset. One technician, a woman named Jane Greer, writes in a forbidden diary, we are alchemists, turning rock into fire, but no one will know our names. She buries the diary beneath a redbud tree, a confession to soil. Meanwhile, Groves orders a second city flung across a mesa in New Mexico, Los Alamos, chosen for its altitude and isolation, a place where the horizon feels like the edge of the world. The army evicts boys from a boarding school mid-semester, their half-finished essays on Shakespeare remain in empty classrooms, chalk dust still curling around the words to be or not to be. Into this absence march physicists with violin cases and hiking boots, wives carrying babies named after constellations. J. Robert Oppenheimer arrives on horseback, his hat brim snapped low, eyes burning with the fervor of a man who quotes Sanskrit to desert shrubs. He christens the Mesa the Hill, and within weeks it bristles with Quonset huts, a library of stolen European journals, and a mess hall where no bell. Laureates argue over powdered eggs. Imagine the tension on the night the first convoy climbs the switchback road to Los Alamos, engine straining against altitude. In the back of a tarp-covered truck sits a wooden box secured with padlocks. Inside rests a nickel-plated sphere the size of a volleyball, plutonium from a reactor in Washington state, still warm from its radioactive birth. Guards cradle Tommy guns, eye-scanning cliffs for saboteurs who exist only in rumor. When the truck finally jerks to a stop outside a building designated tech area, Oppenheimer himself steps forward, arms thin as reeds. He places his palm on the crate, feeling the faint warmth, and whispers, "Welcome to the new world." Behind him, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains bleed under sunset, as if the land already knows what blood will be required. Back in Tennessee, the Calutrons refuse to sing in tune. Magnetic coils warp under current, operators watch needle gauges dance like jitterbug performers. A young chemist from Chicago, tasked with troubleshooting, realizes the copper wiring is contaminated with silver. Groves authorizes melting 14,700 tons of silver from West Point vaults, coins, tea-sets, air marks, into bus bars thick as a wrestler's arm. Picture molten metal poured in glowing waterfalls, the same silver that once jingled in frontier pockets now coursing through magnets that will separate atoms of U-235 from their heavier cousins. When the first usable uranium emerges, technicians bottle it in nickel canisters labeled tub alloy, a euphemism so genteel it could be a brand of pipe tobacco. But the canisters click against each other like castanets, as if even metal feels the approaching dance of annihilation. Chapter 3, The Uranium Blues and the Plutonium Heart. Winter 1943 coils around the nation like a steel spring. In Chicago, Stagg Field's abandoned football stadium has become a cathedral of graphite bricks, each one hand-carved with a serial number. Beneath the bleachers, Enrico Fermi supervises the world's first nuclear reactor, a lattice of uranium and graphite that looks like a giant's abandoned game of Jenga. The project nickname is Chicago Piles 1, a moniker so deflatingly dull it could be a municipal compost heap. Yet on December 2nd, as snow feathers the stadium's skylights, Fermi's team assembles atop a rickety balcony. A single cadmium rod, nicknamed Zip, dangles from a rope, the last break on a runaway planet. Imagine the hush, 49 scientists holding their breath, Geiger counters chattering like sparrows startled by a hawk. Fermi wears a plain grey suit, tie clipped with a modest pin. He flips a slide rule, calling out multiplication factors in an Italian accent that turns 20s into 20. With each calculation, the neutron count climbs, 50, 100, 150. When the curve approaches criticality, Fermi raises his hand, a conductor poised above silence, then orders, "Zip out." The rod slides free. Counters scream, then stabilize into a steady purr. Chain reaction sustained. Applause erupts, but it is nervous, the clap of men who realize they have opened a door that cannot be shut. Someone produces a bottle of Chianti hidden in a paper bag, paper cups are passed. Fermi signs the straw wrapper, to the new age. The wine tastes metallic, as if already irradiated. Imagine the tension that night as the scientists walk out into cold air that smells of coal smoke and Lake Michigan. They pass a newsstand shouting headlines about Marines on Tarawa, unaware that beneath their feet atoms have learned to breed like viruses. Szilard lingers behind, shaking hands with each colleague, but his eyes plead for forgiveness none of them can grant. He later writes, "We turned the world into a patient with an incurable disease." The phrase will haunt him like a lullaby in a minor key. Meanwhile, the reactor keeps humming, tended by grad students who rotate in shifts, their pocket dosimeters flickering like fireflies. The university paper jokes about Femi's furnace, but the humor feels forced, as if laughter itself had become radioactive. Half a continent away, in the cedar forests of Washington, a new reactor rises along the Columbia River. The site is called Hanford Engineer Works, chosen for its abundance of water and hydroelectric power. Here, the goal is not to sustain a chain reaction but to turn uranium into plutonium, an element so new it once shared its name with a Disney character. Groves demands 250 tons of uranium slugs per month, contractors pour concrete day and night, the mixers spinning like cement carnivals. Laborious, many recruited from Oklahoma Dust Bowls, wear film badges that record exposure in cryptic units no one explains. When the first slug rolls off the line, a foreman autographs it with a grease pencil, "To victory," or something. The slug is warm to the touch, he drops it, curses, sucks burnt fingers. Back at Los Alamos, Oppenheimer convenes Thursday night colloquia in a dormitory lounge lit by kerosene lamps. Blackboards multiply like dark mirrors, equations sprawling across them in chalk dust that tastes of gunpowder. Two design teams emerge, one pursuing a gun-type bomb for uranium, simple as a cannon, the other wrestling with plutonium's maddening tendency to pre-detonate, a fizzle that would scatter precious material across the desert like expensive confetti. The plutonium team, led by a mop-haired explosives prodigy named Seth Neddermeyer, proposes implosion, squeeze a sphere into criticality using symmetrical shock waves. To visualize, they detonate condenser banks that make the lights in Santa Fe flicker. Ranchers phone the utility company, complaining about them electric storms on the Mesa. Imagine the tension in the chemistry lab when a young technician named Dorothy McKibben receives a shipment of plutonium nitrate the color of dried blood. She must transfer it into a burette without spilling a microgram, her hands tremble inside lead-lined gloves. Through the window, she watches a coyote trot across the parade ground, unaware that its footprints will someday register on a scintillometer. Dorothy whispers a lullaby to the plutonium, an old Irish tune her mother sang, because the manual says nothing about how to comfort matter that did not exist on Earth until humans made it. The song echoes off glassware, a fragile human sound against the metallic heartbeat of something elementally lonely. By summer 1944, Hanford's B reactor goes live. President Roosevelt, touring the Pacific, receives a coded cable, the child is born. He pockets the slip, continues inspecting shipyards, never knowing that the child is a slug of plutonium nested in graphite, bathing in neutrons like a fetus in amniotic fluid. Operators watch water gauges through periscopes. If levels drop, the core could melt, seep into the Columbia. Poisoned salmon runs for millennia. They nickname the control rods Scram rods. Legend claims it stands for Safety Control Rod Axeman, a fellow ready to cut the rope and drop the rods if hell breaks loose. The night shift drinks coffee by the gallon, cups stained brown as uranium oxide, eyes red as decay maps. It's hard to believe, but the plutonium must be extracted from irradiated slugs using chemistry so corrosive it eats glass. Engineers design remote canyon cells, rooms sealed behind 4-foot concrete walls, manipulated by slave manipulators, mechanical arms that mirror human gestures in leaded gloves. Operators sit in galleries above, peering through thick windows the color of beer bottles, performing ballet for atoms. They practice by picking up eggs, then light bulbs, then razor blades, training for dexterity they will need when the real slugs arrive. One operator, a former watchmaker, times his movements to symphonies broadcast over intercom. The canyon echoes with Mozart while acid boils below. When the first plutonium button emerges, warm, heavy, the size of a silver dollar, he lifts it with tongs, feels its weight like original sin, and whispers, "Now we are all watchmakers." Chapter 4, The Gadget and the Guillotine. January 1945. Tastes of dust and diesel on the Mesa. Los Alamos has doubled in population, babies cry in Quonset hut wards while theoreticians pace outside, calculating blast yields on the backs of diaper boxes. Oppenheimer, gaunt from chain smoking, dubs the implosion device the Gadget, a nursery nickname for something that could swallow cities. In the high bay of Tech Area 49, a plutonium core arrives wrapped in silk like a relic. Technicians swear they feel warmth through lead-lined gloves, as if the metal remembers the reactor's womb. Nearby, explosives expert George Kistiakowski supervises the molding of lenses, fast and slow explosives shaped to focus shock waves into a perfect sphere. The molds must be machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. Kistiakowski jokes that if Michelangelo had screwed up by that much, David would have had 2 left feet. Imagine the tension on the night shift when a mold cracks, venting hot explosive that smells like almonds and death. Workers evacuate, a safety officer runs in, scoops the molten slag into a bucket, and carries it out like a priest removing sin. No one sleeps that night. Instead, they play poker in the mess hall, cards slapped onto tables with the violence of men trying to beat probability itself. Outside, snow begins to fall, each flake a small white phosphorus that never quite ignites. Oppenheimer stands on a porch, coat collar turned up, watching the flakes vanish against black pines. He recites a line from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." The words frost in the air, hang like prophecy, then dissolve. Across the Tech Area, a wooden tower rises in a desert valley called Trinity. The name, borrowed from a John Donne poem, is Oppenheimer's attempt to baptize the unbaptizable. Carpenters nail planks while ranch cattle watch, indifferent to the scaffold that will hoist the Gadget 100 feet above the sand. They work under floodlights powered by diesel generators that thrum like distant bombers. Guards patrol with orders to shoot anyone who approaches without a badge, twice in the head, once in the chest, standard protocol for espionage. Meanwhile, meteorologists launch balloons to measure wind shear. They need a calm dawn so fallout will drift into empty desert, not toward towns with names like Tularosa and Socorro, places where people still go to church and name their children after saints. In the assembly building, the plutonium core is lowered into a nickel shell polished to a mirror finish. Technicians see their distorted faces, elongated, ghostly, staring back. They insert initiators, beryllium pellets that will spit neutrons at the moment of compression, kicking the dragon awake. Each bolt is torqued by hand, the click of wrenches echoing like guillotine locks. A final checklist: 32 explosive lenses, 32 detonators, 32 cables leading to a bunker 5,000 yards away. One technician counts on his fingers, over and over, as if numbers might forgive him. When the Gadget is hoisted onto a truck, the tires sink into the sand, even the earth seems reluctant to bear the weight. Imagine the tension on July 15, 1945, while the world outside celebrates the end of rationing with victory gardens and swing music. At Trinity, lightning forks across the horizon, rain lashes the corrugated roofs. Groves, ever the engineer, worries the explosives will absorb moisture and fizzle. He orders canvas tarps, teams of men wrestling them over the tower like sailors reefing sails in a storm. Oppenheimer chainsmokes, pacing inside a bunker whose walls are 10 feet of reinforced concrete. He has bet his conscience on weather reports scribbled in pencil. If the storm persists, they must postpone, and delay gnaws at morale like rust on iron. At 2 a.m., the meteorologist delivers news: winds aloft are shifting, skies made clear by dawn. Groves grunts, "We go." The word spreads in whispers, a contagion of dread and exhilaration. At 3:30, the arming party climbs the tower. Flashlights carve gold. Tunnels through rain. They connect detonators, twist caps, run cables down the ladder, each step a countdown. One scientist slips, catches himself, the ladder vibrates, and for a heartbeat they imagine the Gadget toppling, exploding sideways, a dud that would scatter plutonium across the desert like toxic pollen. But the tower holds. They retreat to bunkers, driving jeeps with headlights off, navigating by starlight now piercing clouds. In the control bunker, a loudspeaker counts, -10 minutes. Voices answer in sequence, mechanical as rosary beads. Edward Teller, uncharacteristically quiet, smears sunscreen on his face despite the darkness. When asked why, he grins, "I don't want to get burned." The joke falls flat, swallowed by the hum of oscilloscopes. Imagine the tension at 5 hours 29 minutes and 45 seconds. The desert holds its breath, insects fall silent. In that final second, electrons race through cables faster than thought. 32 detonators fire within a microsecond, lenses implode, plutonium compresses, initiators spit neutrons, and the dragon wakes. A light knot of this world blooms, brighter than noon, brighter than metaphor, turning sand to glass, turning night to negative. The tower vaporizes, the shock wave rolls out like the fist of an angry god. Observers feel heat across their faces though they stand miles away, some drop to knees, others laugh, others weep. Femi, ever the scientist, tears strips of paper, drops them as the blast wave passes, calculates yield from their drift, 10 kilotons, maybe more. In the bunker, Oppenheimer clutches a post, remembers the Gitter line, but later admits he thought of another, I am time, the destroyer of all things. Outside, the mushroom cloud rises, a white column climbing into indigo, folding into a cap that glows orange with radioactive iron. It is beautiful and obscene, a cathedral built of fission fragments. Ranch hands, roused by the flash, think the sun has risen twice, they cross themselves, whisper of Armageddon. Groves, composed again, radios Washington, operation successful. Results exceed expectations. He uses the past tense, as if the future had already been decided. In the desert, Trinitite, green glass born of sand, spreads like a frozen lake, reflecting the cloud's underbelly. Scientists collect samples with tongs, drop them into lead boxes, labels reading radioactive, do not open. One physicist pockets a small piece, a souvenir he will keep in a desk drawer until cancer blooms in his bones years later, a delayed echo of the light he witnessed. It's hard to believe, but the test site still smolders when a courier loads a lead-lined canister into the back of a Dodge sedan. Inside rests a shard of Trinitite and a report stamped with a new code name, Fat Man. The sedan drives east, toward an airfield where a B-29 named boxcar waits under floodlights. The driver chain smokes, windows crack to stay awake, every mile feels like towing a comet by its tail. Behind him, Trinity crater steams in the dawn, a wound cauterized yet infinite. Oppenheimer remains at base camp, stares at the horizon where dust hangs like a question mark no equation can solve. He has tasted the apple of knowledge, found it bitter, and the world, still unaware, sleeps on the brink of the same bite. Chapter 5, The Silverplate Saints. 3 weeks after Trinity's white sunrise, a convoy of unmarked trucks rattles across the high plains night toward Wendover Army Airfield, a salt-blown outpost straddling the Utah-Nevada line where the only civilians are jackrabbits and liquor runners. Inside the lead truck sits Colonel Paul Tibbets, 29 years old, bomber pilot since age 22, a man who has already flown 25 missions over Hitler's Europe and come home hollow-eyed. His orders are terse: form a squadron, train for a single mission, ask no questions in public. The airfield's hangars yawn like black cathedrals, wind scours the tarmac with grit that could blind a man, or baptize him. When the trucks stop, engines ticking into silence, Tibbet steps out, smells sagebrush and aviation fuel, and knows he has arrived at the edge of the map where morality is written in pencil. Imagine the tension the next dawn when 24 B-29s, modified under a program codenamed Silverplate, touch down one after another, their silver bellies reflecting a sky the color of burnished steel. Each bomber has been gutted and reborn, bomb bays widened, armor stripped, engines tuned to scream at 35,000 feet. Tibbet circles them like a rancher inspecting prized bulls, running gloved fingers over rivets that might soon carry the weight of a new sun. He picks one, serial number 44 to 86,292, and names her Enola Gay after his mother who once told him, "Whatever you do, be sure it matters." He has the words painted in block letters beneath the cockpit, a filial signature on an instrument of apocalypse. Crews arrive in groups of 10, culled from the best squadrons in the AAF. They are briefed in a Quonset hut whose windows have been painted black. A sign reads, "What you hear here, stays here." A physicist in civilian tweed, never introduced, shows them film of Trinity, the silent bloom, the swirling column. Some men whistle, others feel their stomachs drop like loose bombs. Tibbet stands at the front, arms crossed, voice calm, "Your target is not a city. It is a weapon that ends a war. Aim carefully, fly high, come home." The words sound simple, almost gentle, yet they echo inside each skull like a hammer inside an empty 55-gallon drum. Training begins at altitude where breathing requires oxygen masks that frost around the lips. Crews practice sharp turns, sudden dives, the violent maneuver called the escape curve, a 155-degree bank that will put as many miles as possible between bomber and blast in 90 seconds. They drop practice shapes filled with concrete over the Salton Sea, then circle back to photograph splash patterns. Bombardiers learn to use a new radar beacon sight, its crosshairs jittery with static. Navigators memorize Japanese coastal silhouettes drawn from memory and guesswork. Imagine the tension on nights when engines fail, when desert thermals slam the giants into air pockets, when one crew vanishes into the Great Salt Lake, no wreckage, only a oil slick that glimmers like a black rainbow under moonlight. Tibbets files the report, training accident, cause unknown. He underlines unknown twice, the pencil snapping. Off duty, the men inhabit a limbo of secrecy and sand. They drink rotgut whiskey in a tin-roofed bar nicknamed the Oasis, where jukebox songs skip from scratched records. Some write letters they cannot mail, others stare at pin-up girls whose eyes seem to accuse. A chaplain sets up a portable altar, attendance is sparse. One pilot, Captain Bob Lewis, who will later co-pilot Enola Gay, keeps a diary, "We are preparing to open a door that can never be closed. Lord, let history judge us merciful." He hides the notebook beneath his bunk, wrapped in a silk map of Japan. Meanwhile, armorous truck in cylindrical shapes under tarps, even the drivers wear blindfolds. Inside the cylinders are thin shells of uranium-235, polished until they reflect faces distorted by guilt and anticipation. On the last night before deployment, Tibbets walks the flight line. Alone. Runway lights stretch like amber beads into darkness, beyond them, the salt flats shimmer under starlight, an earthbound galaxy. He thinks of his mother humming church hymns while pinning laundry, of the smell of fresh bread in an Ohio kitchen, of boys he has watched burn inside falling fortresses over Bremen. He touches the cool metal of Enola Gay's propeller, feels the engine's latent torque, and whispers, "Just get us there and back." Overhead, a meteor scratches a white line across the sky, brief as a fuse. Tibbet salutes it, half serious, half desperate, then turns toward briefing where the final target maps await, cities circled in red, names that until now were only syllables on language training records: Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata. Imagine the tension at 02 for 5 hours, the 6th of August, 1945, when Enola Gay lumbers into a sky bruised with monsoon clouds. The runway trembles, the bomb bay holds Little Boy, a gun-type uranium bomb nicknamed for its slim waist, innocent as a child's drawing. Tibbets keeps one hand on the yoke, one on the throttles, eye-scanning engine gauges that glow like confessionals. Behind him, navigator Theodore Van Kirk calls headings, bombardier Thomas Ferriby crouches over his sight, knees already aching. In the tail, 20-year-old tail gunner Bob Caron clutches a camera he has been ordered to use only after the flash. The plane climbs through 5,000 feet, 8,000, 12,000, the desert shrinks to a wrinkled quilt, then to nothing. Ahead lies the Pacific, black and infinite, a canvas awaiting sunrise none of them will ever forget. Chapter 6, The Flash over Hiroshima. Dawn finds the bomber formation skimming cloud decks at 30,000 feet, 3 ships in a loose triangle, Enola Gay, the great artiste, Necessary Evil, names that sound like failed rock bands or successful prayers. Inside, oxygen masks fog, flight suits smell of sweat and tension. They have been airborne 6 hours, droning westward toward a rendezvous point called Iwo Jima, where the rising sun literally rises beneath them, a red disk climbing out of the Pacific. Radio men listen to Japanese chatter, voices crackling through static like sticks broken underwater. No one suspects, the war has been routine bombing for months, cities accustomed to sirens. Imagine the tension when Tibbets announces over intercom, "Target Hiroshima. Bomb run will begin in 40 minutes. His voice is steady, but the words feel like nails hammered into soft wood. At 0815 local time, Ferriby peers through the northern sight, sees the T-shaped AIOI bridge materialize from morning haze, a miniature he once studied on a sand table model. He adjusts drift, crosshairs sliding over rooftops, canals, schoolyards where children are performing morning calisthenics. Little boy drops free at 31,000 feet, the plane lurches upward, suddenly 9,000 pounds lighter. Tibbets banks hard into the escape curve, engine screaming. 43 seconds of silence, long enough for a man to recite the Lord's Prayer twice, then the sky splits. A light whiter than any sun floods the cockpit. Charon, in the tail, sees the city vanish inside a boiling hemisphere of violet white. The shock wave punches the bomber, rattles rivets, but they hold. Below, a second sun has risen, rooted to Earth, feeding on itself. Imagine the tension inside the fuselage as crew members peel back blackout goggles. Through the waste window, Charon watches a column climb, its cap already flattening into the signature mushroom. The stem is orange, the head iridescent, a poisonous lotus. He raises the camera, fingers trembling, and begins to shoot, frame after frame, each click a small mechanical scream. On the intercom, someone whispers, "My God," the microphone left open, the phrase looping like a broken record. Tibbets orders radio silence, but the words have already escaped into the ether, a testament broadcast to no one and everyone. Far below, Hiroshima is a charcoal sketch smudged by wind, its edges bleeding fire. They circle once, twice, recording damage. The city center is gone, replaced by a red-brown bruise that pulses with secondary explosions. Rivers steam, bridges lie tangled like snapped necklaces. Fires merge into a single conflagration that sucks in air, creating whirlwinds of flame. From 30,000 feet, humans are invisible, reduced to scurrying specks or shadows burned onto walls. Charon keeps shooting until film runs out, then stares, camera limp in his lap. He will later write in a letter never mailed, "We saw the world end, and we were the angels holding the sword." The plane turns east, engines droning toward Tinian, leaving behind a silence louder than thunder. Back on Tinian, crews crowd the runway as Enola Gay taxis in, propellers coughing to stillness. Tibbet steps onto the tarmac, greeted by cameras and generals, but the applause sounds muffled, as if underwater. He tries to smile, the muscles refuse. Medics offer whiskey, he waves them off, walks to the edge of the coral runway, vomits into the surf. The Pacific accepts the offering without comment. That night, mess halls buzz with forced bravado, poker games run late, chips slammed like artillery. Yet every man keeps glancing skyward, expecting a second sun to rise, this time above their own heads. In the classified logs, the mission is recorded as successful. The word carries no adjective for what else it might be. Imagine the tension 3 days later, when Boxcar lifts off carrying Fat Man, the plutonium implosion bomb. Clouds shroud Kokura, Nagasaki becomes the alternate. Again, the escape curve, again the flash, this time witnessed by POWs in camp barracks who think the world has finally ended and they are already in purgatory. The second sun rises over cathedral spires and shipyards, over schools where girls translate English sentences, "I have a pen." "He has a pencil." The sentences evaporate mid-word. Afterward, Japan will surrender, bells will ring in Times Square, kisses will photograph themselves into history. But on the runway at Tinian, as Boxcar's tires screech home, a mechanic notices a faint oily film on the bomb bay doors. He wipes it away with a rag, unaware he is erasing the last traces of a city's ghost. Chapter 7, Ashes and Emperors. August 15, 1945, Tokyo swelters under a sky the color of old pewter. Inside a bomb shelter palace, Emperor Hirohito sits before a microphone of American manufacture, his voice, high, brittle, never before broadcast, piped across a nation whose cities still smolder like charcoal briquettes. He speaks of new and most cruel bombs, of enduring the unendurable. In rice paddies, farmers kneel, foreheads pressed to mud, unable to reconcile the divine timbre with surrender. Imagine the tension in Hiroshima's outskirts where survivors, hair singed, skin hanging like wet paper, gather around a shattered radio, hoping for permission to die with honor, hearing instead the order to live with shame. The static crackles like Geiger counters, the emperor's words drift, half lost, between frequency ghosts. In Washington, President Truman announces victory, grinning photographers catching him mid-handshake. The headline type is 2 inches tall, war ends. Yet in secret memos, scientists calculate casualty estimates for both bombs, 70,000 dead at Hiroshima, 40,000 at Nagasaki, numbers rounded like artillery calibers. The memos are stamped top secret, filed beside reports on projected American invasion losses, 500,000 Purple Hearts pre-ordered, body bags stacked in quartermaster warehouses like grain sacks. The arithmetic of spared lives becomes a sedative, generals sleep easier, politicians toast to pragmatism. Still, in the margins, someone pencils a question, at what cost saved? The graphite smudges under a sweaty thumb, unanswered. Back on the mesa, Los Alamos celebrates with contraband beer and a square dance in the mess hall. A phonograph scratches out "Don't Fence Me In," couples stomp, boots raising dust that might still be hot. Oppenites, what the scientists call themselves, trade jokes about chain reactions in dance floors. Yet near the bulletin board, a young technician stares at a wire photo, a woman kneels beside a child's shadow etched onto stone. The technician's laughter dies mid-throat, he feels the beer turn acrid, as if hops could absorb guilt. That night he writes to his fiancée, "We won the war, but I fear we lost something larger. I no longer know what to pray for." He seals the envelope, then burns it in an ashtray, watching paper curl like irradiated skin. Imagine the tension in October when occupation troops march through Nagasaki's ruins. Marines hand out chocolate to children whose teeth have already fallen out from radiation, the candy tastes of iron and ash. A chaplain sets up a makeshift altar in a shattered cathedral, shards of stained glass crunch beneath combat boots, the colors, crimson, cobalt, now muted to desert khaki. Doctors note strange symptoms, hair loss, purple lesions, fevers that spike then vanish like desert mirages. They call it radiation sickness, a phrase absent from medical texts, so they catalogue symptoms in pencil, sketching a new taxonomy of suffering. One physician, Captain William Nolan, writes in a diary he will bury beneath a camellia bush, "We are learning to name the wound we invented." In Tokyo, MacArthur lands like a proconsul, all sunglasses and corncob pipe. He signed surrender documents on the USS Missouri, deck plank scrubbed to showroom shine. Cameras click, sailors cheer. Yet below decks, a radioman who helped carry stretchers at Okinawa listens to the celebration through steel bulkheads and feels only hollowness, as if victory were a drum with no skin. He keeps a tiny vial of black sand in his pocket, trinitite dust traded for 2 cigarettes, unable to explain why he strokes it like a rosary. That night he dreams of a city where shadows walk upright and the living crawl on their bellies. He wakes in sweat, unsure which side won. It's hard to believe, but in the White House Rose Garden, Truman pins a Medal of Merit on Leslie Groves, citation praising conception and execution of a project of unprecedented magnitude. Cameras capture the general's bulldog smile, the president's firm handshake. No photographers record the moment weeks later when Groves visits Walter Reed and meets a patient whose jaw has been removed by cancer blooming where no cancer should. The man, once a uranium miner, writes on a slate, "Did I help end the war?" Groves nods, cannot speak, ends up patting the man's shoulder with a gesture clumsy as a salute. Outside, autumn leaves spiral like spent shell casings, the general pockets one, yellow as enriched ore, and never mentions the visit in his memoirs. Chapter 8, The Crossroads of the World. July 1946, Bikini Atoll, turquoise water, coconut palms bent by trade winds, a lagoon so still it could be poured glass. Yet the beach is strewn with ghost ships, Saratoga, Nagato, Prince Eugene, veterans of 2 oceans now tethered like sacrificial goats. Operation Crossroads has begun, the first nuclear test since Trinity, this time witnessed by generals, scientists, and newsreel cameras hungry for spectacle. Local islanders have been evacuated with promises they can return, promises wrapped in the same cordial tone used to name the bomb after a swimsuit brand. Imagine the tension aboard USS Appalachian, a floating press room where journalists type on battered Remingtons, each key strike a small gunshot of urgency. They compete for adjectives to describe the unimaginable, rehearse phrases like mighty mushroom and hell's cauliflower, unaware how quickly language will exhaust itself. Test Able detonates at 0900, a plutonium bomb dropped from ABU-29 named Dave's Dream. The flash whites out cameras, the shock wave races outward, slapping ship hulls like an angry tide. One reporter, clutching the rail, vomits into the Pacific, then scribbles, "It was as if the ocean itself flinched." When the cloud ascends, sailors cheer, habit from victory, but the sound cracks, uncertain. Instruments record radiation, Geiger counters click like hail on tin roofs. Back in Washington, senators watch footage and nod approvingly, already calculating budgets for a navy that might survive such fire. They do not see the lagoon's water, now tinted lavender, lapping against decks where test dummies in sailor suits sit charred, their plaster faces melted into expressions of perpetual surprise. Tess Baker, 3 weeks later, is an underwater detonation. The bomb descends in a steel caisson nicknamed Helen of Bikini because her face has launched more ships than any metaphor. When she erupts, the lagoon fountains 1 million tons of radioactive water, collapsing ships, drowning hopes of easy decontamination. Imagine the tension when divers, wearing lead-lined suits, descend into the lagoon days afterward and find fish swimming belly up, their scales glowing faintly like fallen stars. One sailor, swabbing a deck, dips a bucket, hauls up water that steams, within hours his hands blister as if from invisible steam. Doctors label it beta burn, a phrase that sounds almost collegiate, fraternity hazing rather than baptism by fission. In Los Alamos, Oppenites watch newsreels in stunned silence. The mushroom has become a celebrity, its portrait syndicated worldwide. A physicist named Joseph Hirschfelder sketches the cloud on a cafeteria napkin, then overlays pressure curves, calculates that a 20-megaton bomb is now feasible. The napkin is passed hand to hand like contraband, some eyes gleam with pride, others with terror. Edward Teller, eyes bright as Tesla coils, begins lobbying for the a hydrogen bomb that would make Bikini look like a firecracker. The debate fractures hallways into fiefdoms, friendships sour over coffee cups that read "Peace on Earth" in fading Christmas script. Imagine the tension when a petition drafted by scientists urging a demonstration blast rather than military use, too late for Japan, finally reaches the public. Headlines brand them soft on communism, congressmen call for loyalty oaths. The age of innocence ends not with a bang but with subpoenas. On Bikini, islanders wait on nearby Rongerik, eating through donated rations, watching the horizon for the promised all-clear that never quite arrives. Their coconut trees fail to fruit, fish taste metallic. Children develop sores that glow under flashlight beams. A chief, dressed in a suit given by Navy officers, asks visiting scientists, "When can we go home?" The translator falters, invents phrases about clean-up phases and residual levels, words that taste of ash. Years later, medical teams will record thyroid cancers, miscarriages, birth defects, data points on graphs that never quite intersect with policy papers. The atoll becomes a synonym for exile, the swimsuit adopts the name and thrives in suburban pools, a linguistic irony no lexicographer can bleach clean. Imagine the tension in November 1946 when the United Nations, still newborn, umbilical with idealism, debates international control of atomic energy. Bernard Baruch, aging financier, presents a plan, give fissile material to a world authority, outlaw national arsenals. The Soviet delegation counters with proposals that smell like espionage traps, negotiations collapse into veto thunder. Journalists label the stalemate Cold War, a phrase that sounds almost cozy, scarves and cocoa rather than silos and countdown clocks. Back home, Americans practice duck and cover under school desks, as if Oakwood could outwit gamma rays. Civil defense films show cartoon turtles retreating into shells, children giggle, unaware the joke is on them. Chapter 9, The Race for the Super. Winter 1949, Los Alamos is a town wearing two faces, postcard snow on adobe, classified schematics locked in safes thick as bank vaults. News arrives like a dagger, Soviets have detonated their own atomic bomb, nicknamed Joe the One by analysts with gallows humor. The announcement shatters the American monopoly faster than any chain reaction. In Washington, congressional hearings snarl with recrimination, fingers point at spies, at scientists who once attended cocktail parties with communist-sympathizing intellectuals. Imagine the tension when FBI agents arrive at Los Alamos carrying polygraphs like portable confessionals. One physicist, sleepless for days, miswires a capacitor and triggers a minor explosion in a lab. Rumors spread that it was sabotage. Paranoia metastasizes. Colleagues eye one another over cafeteria jello, wondering who keeps a second notebook hidden in a raincoat lining. Edward Teller, Hungarian accent thick as goulash, campaigns relentlessly for the super, a weapon that would fuse hydrogen isotopes, yield measured not in kilotons but megatons, citikillers squared. He paces hallways, chalk in hand, scrawling equations that look like incantations. Oppenheimer, now director of the Institute for Advanced Study, opposes the crash program, calling it a weapon of genocide, not war. Their debates echo in conference rooms where once unity prevailed, friendship curdles into enmity. Imagine the tension when Teller accuses Oppenheimer of lacking moral imagination, the phrase itself a mushroom cloud of irony. The rift splits the scientific community like atoms in a centrifuge, those who believe deterrent requires bigger sticks, and those who fear sticks will eventually be used. In 1951, a new test site is carved from the Nevada desert, closer to home, easier to wire for instruments. It is called Frenchman Flat, though no Frenchman ever farmed this alkali. The first device, nicknamed Labeled Again, is dropped from a B-50. Las Vegas residents are advised to watch from hotel rooftops, sunglasses optional. Casinos run dawn bomb parties, camped champagne for early risers. Showgirls pose beside mushroom-shaped cakes, gamblers place chips on roulette numbers corresponding to kilotons. Imagine the tension when a miscalculation sends a radiation cloud drifting toward St. George, Utah, where children play in white dust that smells of ozone. Years later, leukemia clusters bloom like desert flowers after rare rain, downwinders file lawsuits that crawl through court slower than half-lives decay. At Los Alamos, calculations race ahead of ethics. Designers invent the Telluride configuration, radiation pressure imploding fusion fuel, a star ignited on Earth. When Ivy Mike detonates in the Pacific, November 1952, the yield is 10.4 megatons, a fireball 3 miles wide, an island vaporized, a crater 200 feet deep. Observers aboard ships feel heat through closed portholes. One sailor describes it as the moment the planet shows its bones. A physicist who helped design the bomb collects coral turned to fallout dust, stores it in a mason jar on his desk, paper label reading, "Do not open, ever." Imagine the tension when he wakes each morning to see the jar, like a bedside memento mori, whispering that Prometheus is no longer a myth but an employee badge number. Oppenheimer, called before the Atomic Energy Commission Security Board, answers questions about past associations, past doubts. His security clearance is revoked. Headlines brand him security risk, the same mind that birthed the bomb now deemed too fragile to tend it. He leaves the hearing room, face drawn, trailed by cameras that devour his silhouette. Teller testifies, offers qualified support that feels like a knife between vertebrae. When asked if he trusts Oppenheimer, Teller replies, "I would feel more secure if important matters were in other hands." The sentence hangs like fallout, invisible yet persistent. Later, Teller will design warhead smaller, lighter, mountable on rockets that arc across continents in 30 minutes. The age of city-busting bombers gives way to intercontinental ballistic missiles, sleek as cemetery angels, restless in silos buried beneath wheat fields and prairie grass. Imagine the tension in 1955 when a schoolgirl in Denver writes to President Eisenhower, "If the bomb comes, should I wear my coat or will it not matter?" The letter is forwarded to civil defense officials who produce a film starring a cartoon turtle. The girl's question remains unanswered, hanging in the air like a Geiger click that never quite resolves. Meanwhile, stockpiles grow, uranium enriched in centrifuges spinning at 90,000 revolutions per minute, plutonium bred in reactors whose cooling water is returned to rivers warmer by degrees, ecosystems noticing but lacking vocabulary to protest. The arms race becomes a treadmill powered by fear, each step faster, each breath shorter. Scientists who once chased Nobel Prizes now chase funding for bigger bombs, their slide rules replaced by early IBM computers humming behind glass walls like mechanical monks chanting binary sutras. Chapter 10, The Half-Life of Conscience. 1962, Oppenheimer stands at a blackboard in Princeton, chalking equations that have nothing to do with weapons. His hair has silvered, his gaze carries the weight of cities that might have been. Students shuffle in, unaware the man before them once held the power to unmake worlds between thumb and forefinger. He lectures on quantum tunneling, the improbable escape of particles through barriers, a metaphor he never voices but feels in marrow. After class, a freshman approaches, asks for career advice. Oppenheimer hesitates, then says, "Choose work you can confess to your children." The sentence leaves the boy silent, clutching textbooks like armor against a future still unwritten. Imagine the tension in that hallway, generations balanced on a syllable. In Los Alamos, new laboratories gleam like suburban shopping centers, fountains outside, supercomputers inside. Teller, now lab director, campaigns for peaceful uses, Project Plowshare, nuclear excavation for harbors, canals, even a proposed second Panama Canal blasted radioactive. Test shots with names like Sedan carve craters 1,200 feet wide, tourists are buster rims for photo ops, Geiger counters clicking in souvenir shops. Yet radioactivity lingers longer than economic models predict, crops downwind show strange mutations, corn with double cobs, tomatoes that never ripen. Farmers file lawsuits, scientists produce charts, congressmen cut budgets. The dream of atomic gardening withers, a fallout seed that fails to germinate. Teller, undeterred, proposes nuclear propulsion for spacecraft, a rocket that could reach Mars in weeks but might launch from a pad too hot for human feet afterward. In 1963, Oppenheimer receives the Enrico Fermi Award, a medal handed by President Johnson in a ceremony thick with reconciliation rhetoric. Cameras flash, hands shake, yet the ovation feels like an echo arriving years late. After the banquet, Oppenheimer retreats to a hotel balcony overlooking the Potomac, lights a cigarette, watches barges crawl below like iron beetles. A reporter asks how history should remember him. He exhales smoke, replies, "As a man who saw too clearly, and not clearly enough." The quote makes headlines, but the nuance drowns in column inches. Later that night he dreams of Trinity, but the tower is made of bones, the mushroom cloud a skull expanding. He wakes, writes the dream on hotel stationery, folds it into his wallet where it will remain until his death from throat cancer in 1967, a delayed burn traced in part to wartime radiation exposure, irony wrapped in carcinoma. Across the nation, anti-nuclear movements bloom like desert flowers after rare rain. Students occupy university labs, mothers march with strollers bearing signs, "We want to live, not glow." In 1982, 1 million people gather in New York Central Park, calling for a freeze on warhead production. Imagine the tension when a physicist who worked on hydrogen bomb triggers steps onto the stage, holds up a vial of plutonium no bigger than a cough drop, and says, "This could kill every person in this park. We made it possible. We must make it impossible." The crowd roars, a wave of sound that rattles windows in penthouses where defense contractors sip scotch older than the protesters. Some scientists join the movement, signing petitions, testifying before Congress, others retreat into classified silence, comforted by deterrence theory, the cold equation that more bombs mean less chance of use, a paradox they defend like medieval scholastics arguing angels on pinheads. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolves not with a bang but with bankrupt whimpers. Stockpiles remain, rusting in silos, guarded by unpaid soldiers who sell souvenirs to Western tourists, control panel switches, decommissioned warheads painted like circus props. Yet the genie refuses rebottling, knowledge, once tasted, lingers. In 1998, India and Pakistan test bombs within weeks, mountains trembling across borders drawn by colonial rulers long dead. Newspapers recycle. Mushroom cloud file photos, television anchors relearn pronunciation of cities like Shanghai and Pokhran. Imagine the tension in a Karachi classroom when a teacher asks students to draw their neighborhood. One child sketches a sky split by a towering white stalk, then erases it, replaces it with a kite. The erased image remains, indented on paper, visible when light hits at certain angles, a palimpsest of fear. At Los Alamos, aging scientists gather for reunions, their name badges written in larger fonts each year. They tour museums where casing models hang like modern sculptures, sleek, minimalist, death refined to 300 kilograms of plumbing. Descents, born after the Cold War, recite specifications while visitors pose for selfies. In the gift shop, one can buy coffee mugs shaped like mushroom clouds, T-shirts proclaiming "I got a blast at the lab." A veteran physicist, now stooped, watches a teenager sip latte from a cloud mug and whispers, "We thought we were saving the world, not merchandising it." His wife leads him away before tears can fall. The teenager never hears, checks Instagram filters that add cartoon radiation symbols sparking around his head. Imagine the tension in that moment: history commodified, horror sanitized, memory reduced to caffeine temperature. In 2020, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist sets the doomsday clock at 100 seconds to midnight, the closest ever. Reason cited: climate change, disinformation, resurgent nationalism, and the slow dismantling of arms control treaties. In a webinar, a young physicist displays a slide, a graph of warhead reduction since 1986, downward slope flattening like a plateau approaching cliff. She warns that modernization programs, smaller, smarter, more precise, threaten to reignite the arms race under new flags. Viewers watch on laptops muted by pandemic isolation, their faces lit by screensaver galaxies. Chat scrolls with questions: can we ever UN invent this? Is deterrence still sane? The moderator reads them aloud, voice echoing in empty auditoriums. No one offers certainty, probability is the only currency left. Closing summary. We began this journey in a Columbia University basement where graphite bricks first learned to breathe fire, and we end it on a digital screen where seconds to midnight are tallied by human hands that have never touched plutonium but feel its weight nonetheless. Between those points stretch cities vaporized, deserts glassed, atolls emptied, and consciences irradiated, an atlas drawn by splitting the atom and, in doing so, splitting the story we tell ourselves about who we are. The Manhattan Project was not merely a feat of physics, it was a mirror held up to humanity's brightest ingenuity and darkest necessity, reflecting both salvation and shadow in the same blinding flash. Listen again to the echoes, the Geiger counters ticking like distant cicadas, the slide rules snapping like dry twigs underfoot, the mothers humming lullabies to children who will never know why their hometown maps end at barbed wire. These are not relics, they are refrains. Every generation must decide anew whether knowledge is a tool or a temple, whether security requires walls or bridges, whether the light we kindled in 1945 is a lantern or a law. The scientists who toasted with Chianti, the pilots who vomited in Pacific surf, the islanders who still wait to go home, they are not footnotes, they are our elders in uncertainty, citizens of the same precarious future. We stand today amid stockpiles smaller yet more precise, treaties fraying like old film stock, nations eyeing one another across fiber optic cables where cyber shadows replicate the old mistrust. The mushroom cloud has become icon, metaphor, meme, flattened into shorthand for every apocalypse we fear. But behind the icon are human hands, typing code, calibrating centrifuges, signing orders, buttoning radiation badges over hearts that still quicken at love letters and sunrise. The bomb is not destiny, it is decision. And decisions, unlike half-lives, can be changed. So what do we carry forward? Perhaps it is the humility of Femi signing a straw wrapper, the caution of Szilard whispering a prayer for forgiveness, the courage of technicians who bottle nightmares and still plant redbud trees. Perhaps it is the recognition that every scientific breakthrough is also a moral interrogation, that every budget line for warheads could be a vaccine, a classroom, a turbine blade. Perhaps it is the simple, terrifying recognition that the door opened in 1945 can never be fully closed, only watched, tended, and, or if we are wise, narrowed by millimeters each year through treaties, transparency, and the stubborn insistence that security is a collective verb, not a national noun. Imagine the tension of tomorrow's dawn, when the clock may tick closer or farther depending on choices made in bunkers, classrooms, voting booths, and quiet kitchens where parents decide what stories to tell their children about the world they will inherit. The Manhattan Project is not history, it is prologue. Its legacy lives in every reactor cooled, every warhead dismantled, every protest sign raised, every diplomat who refuses to let fear write the final draft of policy. It lives in the knowledge that genius without conscience is merely cleverness, and cleverness without conscience is a countdown. May we remember not only the flash but the faces, not only the yield but the yearning, not only the power but the price. May we build monuments not to the weapon but to the warning, museums that mourn as much as they marvel. May we teach the next generation that the most critical mass is not uranium but empathy, the most powerful chain reaction not fission but solidarity. And may we walk the deserts and cities and atolls with reverence, listening for the faint click that still lingers in soil and bone, a reminder that we are custodians of a fire we did not extinguish, we only learned to cup it, trembling, in our collective palms. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you made it this far, you're the reason we keep going. Please subscribe and help us continue sharing these stories with the world.